The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode 55.
Captain to bridge. Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Deep Space Nine episode, Past Prologue. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
And folks, if you want to make sure you always get the latest episodes of The Secrets of Star Trek, please subscribe. You can do so in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app, in Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app like Overcast or Stitcher, or on YouTube where you should hit the bell to get notifications. So we're talking about the Deep Space Nine, the second episode of the series, Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. We've jumped back to the beginning. And this is something I didn't realize, was that Garak was in from the beginning, was in Deep Space Nine from the second episode of the series. I didn't realize that.
I was surprised he wasn't in the pilot, but this is his introduction.
So we get the beginning of this, right from the beginning of the episode, the beginning of this interesting relationship between Garak and Bashir, this friendship, this odd friendship of the spy who came in from the cold sort of thing. And
in
Bashir,
this case, the spy who didn't come in from the cold.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. And Bashir, who thinks he's sort of an innocent and at this point, who thinks that Garak is a spy and is all enamored of this idea of getting involved in spy craft.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Garak is more than happy to play into it. You know, Bashir's got his eyes are still, lit up with the idea of being this frontier medicine doctor, and now he can get involved in spies and James Bond and all that. And Garak just plays right into it.
Right.
Kind of a meta comment about this episode. I was surprised in rewatching it. I hadn't seen it in years, and it was a lot better than I expected. I remember, like a lot of the Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine took a while to really find its legs and get going. And I remembered there were some early episodes that I wasn't wild about, and so I recognized the first season of DS9 was still way better than the first season of Next Gen.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But there were still some episodes that I kind of thought were clunkers in there. And watching this is like, no, this is a really good episode. This is not suffering from first seasonitis.
The only thing I see with it is it's hard to watch because you can tell that some of the actors are still figuring out their characters in this.
Kira.
And Bashir, definitely, where they're just, O'Brien, he's comfortable because he's been playing this character for a few years already. But, there's some of them where, and it's kind of painful to watch because these are characters that we've gotten to know and to truly love. And it's just like, I forgot how bad they were when they first started.
Yeah.
I would say the actors who had their character from the beginning were, the characters Quark, Sisko,
Odo.
That's it. Odo. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, Odo did change, but that's just more of a
development
of the character. Yeah. Kira was much angrier and confrontational and uncomfortable, I think.
I think that's part of her arc, though, because she's just recently been a terrorist who has now come to power as part of the provisional government, and she's not comfortable with Sisko being here. She really doesn't want the Federation here.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he's the emissary, and she's a woman of faith, and that dynamic is still playing itself out in her head.
Right.
But
Exactly.
she's still very angry.
Oh yeah, and that's part of it. Part of it is I think they did tone her character down a little bit. Part of it is that's part of her character arc, though, of going from being this terrorist to the delegate from the Bajoran government to on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bashir, they change. I mean, by the end, we know that Bashir is really
a mutant.
Yes, he's really a mutant, and this is supposed to be somewhat of an act, although he's still young and a little bit unknowing as well. Whereas I think with Terry Farrell and Dax, I think she just doesn't know what to do with this character yet. I think she's sort of feeling out what does it mean to be a symbiotic creature with a 300-year-old
slug,
who has the personality of an old guy in her still.
I think I remember in an oral history I was listening to hearing Terry Farrell talk about how she didn't, and it took her a while to figure out who Dax was and how she was supposed to relate to Cisco, because they're supposed to be like old friends, and Dax is his former mentor, but she's also this young woman now.
Who is his underling in the command structure. Yeah, I think, in fact, I remember that it was Cisco, the actors...
Avery Brooks.
Avery Brooks was an ad-lib of Old Man the first time they did it, I think, if I recall. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I had this impression. So...
What's major here, though, is the dynamic that gets established between Garak and Bashir.
Right.
And that's something that was originally just a one-episode thing. When Andrew Robinson got hired to play Garak, he didn't expect an ongoing role. He thought, I'm here to do this one show for 1 week, and that's it.
Yep.
And it then led to him becoming, like with several other characters on the show who were introduced as minor players in one-shots, became major people in the overall arc of the show.
Exactly.
Which is one of the distinctives of Deep Space Nine, is how it would do that with auxiliary characters. We're not just locked into our initial starting cast, and they're the only people who we're ever going to follow.
Exactly.
So when we first meet, when Garak and Bashir first meet, Bashir is in the Replimat, which is like it's a play on automats. Automats are self-service restaurants where you like go and you put coins in a machine, in a vending machine, and out comes your lunch or whatever. Here they're doing it with replicator technology. And Bashir is eating, and Garak just comes up and introduces himself and sits down and is super friendly and super creepy.
Yep.
Yes.
Bashir is really uncomfortable around him, but Garak is just very suave and friendly and creepy, and he gives a non-denial denial about being a spy. You know, Bashir starts hinting around, and it's like, Doctor, I hope you're not insinuating I'm some kind of spy.
Oh, Bashir doesn't even hint around. Yeah. Bashir doesn't even hint around. He bluntly basically says, "You're a spy, aren't you?"
Yeah, some people say you're a spy.
But I like Garak because he, when Bashir first says, "Oh, Mr. Garak," and he says, "Oh, I'm just plain simple Garak," which of course, as we come to find out, as they develop the character in later seasons, he's neither plain nor simple Garak.
I'm so glad to have made such an interesting new friend today, he says to Bashir.
Yeah.
It's just so
he's very oily and unctuous.
Yeah. And that's Andrew Robinson did this so well. I mean, because the words just on the page are very straightforward and friendly, but it's the way he plays it. And I think that's why Garak becomes one of the most popular characters, especially secondary characters on the show.
Andrew Robinson also was is an actor of quite some note. And I don't know everything he's done, but he was very famous before this for having been in the film Dirty Harry. He played the Scorpio Killer, the antagonist in Dirty Harry, in the original Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry film. And the Scorpio Killer is a fictionalized version of the Zodiac Killer that was active in San Francisco in like the late 60s, early 70s. And so that's Andrew Robinson comes from this background of having played these really sinister, clever guys.
And so Bashir runs to Ops, where he kind of makes a fool of himself.
He does. Yeah. He's like a puppy dog.
Yeah, he like sort of runs around like,
spy.
I've been approached by a spy. What do I do? And everyone's kind of like, calm down.
Exactly.
And then they get this this alert. There's a Cardassian vessel chasing a Bajoran scout vessel. It's a smaller ship. And Kira, right off the bat, assumes that the Cardassians are the aggressors or the bad guys in the situation, which is understandable given her history. But it sort of sets the viewer up for assuming the same as well, which we are going to have our assumptions
It
challenged.
sets me up for Kira is wrong, but
Yep, right. So he's beamed out of his ship just as it explodes, and then his name is Tanalos.
right. And O'Brien beams him out, and he knows Kira.
Right. And he requests political asylum as they beam him out. Now, Cisco talks to the Cardassian Gull who's chasing him, and he claims that, no, Tanalos is a Konma terrorist. Konma is a terrorist group. They're an extreme version of the terrorists.
They're isolationists. They're extreme isolationists. They are very opposed to the Federation being here, and they're so opposed they're even killing off members of the provisional government who were perceived as collaborators with the Federation. They killed an assistant first minister last month.
Right, and there's this interesting argument that happens between Kira and Cisco over Tana. Right in the promenade, right on the open, this like open insubordination.
Yeah,
where Cisco tells her, "I suggest you get your priorities straight, Major, because I don't have any room for divided loyalties."
Right,
and it was a pretty strong.
Yeah,
and then she gives it right back to him. By the way.
Yeah, interesting. Before that, when he's talking to the Cardassian captain, the captain is like, "You must turn this terrorist over to us immediately." Even the Bajorans don't. The Bajoran provisional government doesn't countenance these guys. They're so extreme. And Cisco acknowledges, the captain's demanding, "Are you going to give him to me or not?" And Cisco says, "I haven't decided yet." And he comes off as very reasonable and thoughtful and methodical. He's not jumping to conclusions one way or another here. And it comes off as a clever diplomat, because when the Cardassian captain starts to try to muscle the situation and intimidate him, he subtly, politely throws it back at him. And points out things that would undermine the captain's position and potentially embarrass him. And so he's both coming across as a really reasonable guy and as a really clever diplomat in dealing with this situation.
He invites him to dock the vessel and says, and then after that, "I'll be glad to hear your explanation for violating Bajoran space and threatening a Federation facility." And the Cardassian, "Oh, we've made no threat to your facilities." "Oh, I stand corrected," Cisco says, which is very clearly saying, you're not threatening a Federation facility potentially starting a war, right?
Are you?
Yeah. You wouldn't do that, would you?
So then we have Cisco being very thoughtful here. This is really setting up his character as in this episode, which is really good. And then this confrontation with Kira, which, again, he is the one who is being level-headed, not jumping to conclusions, not letting emotion get the best of him.
What I find a little difficult here is Kira's position, because I can buy, okay, she's a recent ex-terrorist and stuff, but she is way more sympathetic to Tanalos than I think she ought to be. I mean, she's not on the same side as Tanalos, but she says that she thinks Bajor needs men like him, which initially is a very bold statement. I mean, how can you say he needs men like this guy when he's killing, his group is killing members of the provisional government for collaborating with the Federation? And she then kind of walks it back a little bit and says that at some point they have to reach out and reintegrate the people of Tanalos's organization and so forth. So it comes across as kind of strong. To me, this is a weak point in the writing of the episode.
Right.
I think Kira is too sympathetic to Tanalos. They could have softened that a little bit and still kept the structure of the story. She doesn't have to be this pro Tanalos.
Right. And she makes the point that in order for Bajor to move forward, these splinter groups have to be brought back in to the umbrella, and it's an interesting approach.
Meanwhile, Tanalos himself is being set up as an interesting character because he says that he has used violence. He admits to Cisco, "I have used violence, including since the Cardassian withdrawal from Bajor." So he admits he's used violence recently, but he also says he's had enough of killing.
Right.
And that's actually true. He doesn't want to kill people. He's later kind of pushed into a situation or gets into a situation where he might be willing to do it, but it's not what his goal is.
Right.
And then in the very next scene, so basically had kicked Kira out and it was talking to Tana by himself because she kept interfering. And Kira's in her quarters talking to Starfleet Admiral, basically had gone over Sisko's head, violated the chain of command. And the Admiral also is very diplomatic. Oh, I'm sure. Thank you for bringing to my attention. I will look into this for you. At which point, she then, later on, we'll see that she then calls Sisko and says, I was in a staff meeting, got pulled out of this meeting by your second in command, who's complaining about you. Get it together at DS9. I don't know what you got going on down there, Sisko, but take care of it. And Sisko, to his credit, doesn't immediately go to Kira.
Yeah, the Admiral is like, you got to get this woman on a leash.
Right.
She's out of control. She's jumping over the chain of command. And you're right. Sisko does not immediately bring it up to her, although later Sisko does allude to the fact that he's spoken to the Admiral and, like, if you cross me again, you're in big trouble.
Well, and he does that at a really interesting point, which is Kira has given Sisko a backhanded compliment, thanking him for support of her point. So she's conceded, and in that concession, he then lets her know, by the way, go over my head again and I'll have your head on a platter.
And he smiles and has really cold eyes. Yes,
which Avery Brooks does so well.
Oh, yes.
But in the meantime, Sisko grants asylum to Tanalos, which, again,
provisionally, temporarily.
Did not expect. But Sisko thinks turning him over would undermine everything he's trying to accomplish, which is to lower the rhetoric, lower the temperature in the room, get people sitting at a table, and start to move forward. And turning him over might undermine all that.
There's an interesting moment before he makes this decision where O'Brien talks to him and says, "You've never fought Cardassians, have you?" And O'Brien, of course, we know has. He was, as we'll later learn, the hero of Setlik 3. Right. And so he tells Sisko, well, I wouldn't want to see anyone turned over to them, indicating how bad, in his experience, Cardassians treat prisoners. And at that point, Sisko grants the temporary asylum, and he tells the Cardassian why. He says it's so as not to undermine the Federation's relationship with Bajor, to have the Federation representative to Bajor, him, turn over a Cardassian, a Bajoran freedom fighter to them, would undermine the Federation's relationship with Bajor. But he's not opposed to the idea of them pursuing Tanalos through other legal means. So he says, he's not going to be here on Deep Space Nine permanently. Presumably, he's going to be repatriated to Bajor at some point. And if, as you say, the Bajoran provisional government doesn't cotton to these people, then you could get him extradited at that time.
Right. He has a perfectly acceptable legal alternative all set up for everyone.
You mean blasting him out of space is not a perfectly legal method?
Apparently not. Well, Cardassia is perfectly legal.
Not in
their legal
Bajoran space.
Right.
Exactly. So
then Kira, Tana gets some quarters while he has his asylum, and Kira brings him there, and they have this confrontational. Tana is kind of keeps needling and pushing Kira that she's given in. She's gone soft. She's wearing that uniform and working with the Federation. We shouldn't be, lapdogs to the Federation. They're no better than the Cardassians. It's kind of saying we need to stand alone. And he makes a remark that the wormhole creates the problem,
right,
for Bajor,
because that's why the Federation and the Cardassians will not leave us alone. It's because of the wormhole,
right,
which is foreshadowing for what his actual plan is,
right, and that's shows the extremism. They will eventually show the extremism of these Konma extremists. Is the wormhole is good for Bajor. It makes them a crossroads of trade and commerce and important, to everyone. But they don't care. They just want to be left alone, even if it starves Bajor. They would rather just be left alone. That shows that extreme attitude that people will have.
Interestingly, in this scene, Kira is pragmatic about we have to have the Federation here now to protect us from the Cardassians. But at this point in her character development, she actually does want to end the relationship with the Federation once Bajor has had a chance to recover from the Cardassian occupation. and is strong enough to defend itself. So she does not want Bajor to become part of the Federation.
Right. That idea that Bajor becoming part of the Federation becomes a popular idea, that's a development over time, and one of those characteristics of Deep Space Nine that we all love.
Well, that's what makes this early part of DS9 so interesting. Is it's the first season basically is in a non-Federation space.
Right.
All other seasons might have times where the ship goes out of Federation space, but most of the seasons are within Federation space.
That's true. So then we have another element of chaos introduced into the story. The Duras sisters show up, who we know
and Bator, the bad pennies. You just can't get rid of them.
So we know them from the Next Generation, where they tried to overthrow the Klingon High Council and take control of the Empire. They're on the promenade, refusing to give up their weapons.
I know they're not meant to be sympathetic characters, but they're not my favorite unsympathetic characters. I'm not fans of these guys.
No.
Every story they're in, I find myself not liking as much as if they hadn't been in it.
Right. Yeah. There's just something about these characters that are just unpleasant. I mean, Gul Dukat is a bad guy.
Yeah, he's great. He's deliciously unpleasant. But
right,
these characters are just, oh, really? These guys
annoying.
Again?
They're just annoying.
They're just, I don't know whether it's a cliche or a stereotype of some sort, or just the teeth, the way that makes them talk.
It may be partly the teeth, but it's also they just don't have charisma. So, like with Garrick or Anabran Tain, Garrick's father, who we'll later meet.
Or other Klingons like Gowron.
Well, even Gowron, I'm not wild about. He's got those weird eyes. But all of these, like the Cardassian villains and sinister people here on Deep Space Nine, they're sinister, but they've got charisma. I'd say Worf has charisma as a Klingon, but most of the other Klingon actors they bring on really don't.
Martok does. I like Martok.
Martok does. Martok is really good. Martok has charisma. But a lot of them...
Kolos and the old, like for the Kang and Kolos. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, a lot of the other Klingon characters, it's a hard character to get into, I think, for a lot of actors to kind of really understand how to play it well. Yeah, without just being bombastic.
Yeah, that's the temptation is to just do it over the top, violent, sexual, sinister, whatever, and no subtlety to the performance.
Right. So there's a fun moment where Odo talks to Sisko about the Duras sisters, and he says he wants to throw them in jail. And Sisko says they haven't broken any laws. You can't just throw them in jail. And he says, and Odo says, Cardassian rule may have been oppressive, but at least it was simple. He sort of yearns for the days of simple oppressive rule.
Which is actually a known psychological phenomenon that happens when dictatorships, go away, and suddenly people are having to confront a much more complex situation that's not as predictable as what they were used to.
Well, think about this. This is airing in January of 1993. This is around the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are already experiencing that in real life. So it's interesting. So we move to Quarks, which is smokier than it will be eventually. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but there is a cloud of somebody smoking, shifting around.
I didn't notice that. What I did notice is two customers in the background of different alien races are having a fist pushing contest. Yes. It's like the space version of thumb wrestling or arm wrestling. Is they put their two fists together and they're trying to push on each other with their fists.
I wonder if that was the extras who came up with that, or they were directed to do it. But
I enjoyed it. It's like, yay, okay,
yeah.
So we find the Duras sisters, of course, are meeting with Tana Lost because they're not there for no reason. They're there for a reason.
And Odo, from an unknown species who's only ever experienced the planet Bajor, decides to observe this conversation as a Terran mouse.
Yes, or rat, but yeah. No, that's a Tarkalian rat, of course.
Because, is it?
Because they always are like a Danubian bunny or something. There's always going to be like
something
alien
exotic.
Species,
yeah,
alien planet based on an Earth species. So I noticed that Cisco doesn't tell Kira what Odo has found out about Tanalos meeting with the Duras sisters. He doesn't trust her, which is interesting. Another interesting aspect to this early part of the series.
And this is when she finds out that he knows she's gone over his head, because she's been trying to arrange amnesty for Tanalos with the Bajoran High Council, and by doing so, she's trying to encourage other members of the Konma to renounce violence and repatriate. And Cisco has been helping with that effort. So she's really appreciative of the fact he's helping, trying to reintegrate the Konma into Bajoran society, and thus helping her line up this amnesty deal. And that's when he says, go over my head again and I'll have yours on a platter.
Right. So then the Duras sisters, because they're slimy, and they decide to double-cross Tanalos, and they come to Garrick looking to sell him out to the Cardassians. So there's a scene in Garrick's shop where he's where they try to negotiate, and he denies it first, and then he sort of says, well, let's haggle over the transaction here. And then he goes to
Garrick. He goes to Bashir. Yeah.
Yeah, and says Bashir is kind of playing the game, and Garrick says, nope, no time for that now. Be at my shop to buy a new suit at exactly 20:55. And Bashir, being kind of dense, doesn't get it at first.
Yeah.
And then he realizes. Meanwhile, Kira is telling Tanalos that she won him amnesty, and the Konma amnesty, and he insults her as being a politician.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, there's two more of these Konma guys who are on their way to the station ostensibly to receive amnesty and renounce violence, but they actually may be bringing the gold-pressed latinum that is going to be used to pay off the Duras sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and as Tanalos insults Kira, he says, once you're in your comfortable bed with the Federation, you won't be able to get out. We won't be able to get out. And the irony is, he's actually right. I mean, but that's the best thing for Bajor. But he's right. That's what happens is they stay in a relationship, and Bajor becomes part of the Federation.
And it becomes obvious during the course of this conversation, he came here deliberately knowing she was here, and he's here to recruit her.
Right.
And so even though he is still opposed to violence, he admits that, he is otherwise hardcore. And is here on a covert mission for the Konma, and he wants to enlist her in the plan, but because of compartmentalization, he can't tell her what the plan is.
Right. Mm-hmm. But he says, I need a small warp-capable ship to non-violently accomplish everything we want. So that's the dun-dun-dun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Kira has a moral dilemma, and she goes to Odo to confide that there's stuff she's done she's not proud of. But when she did it, she was sure of the rightness of what she's done.
Right.
But now...
So this is the moral crux of this episode, is the whole, where are Kira's loyalties? Is she going to be loyal to Cisco and the Federation and do her duty to them? Or is she going to be loyal to Tanalos's vision of what loyalty to Bajor should look like and not tell the Federation what's going on? And so we've now got, this is the key crux of the dilemma. And so she consults with Odo, because whichever way she decides this, it's ultimately going to reveal her loyalties one way or the other. She kind of earlier, when Cisco had pushed her and said, there's no room for divided loyalties, you need to evaluate your priorities, she said, there's no question about my loyalties, they're to Bajor. Well, okay, yeah, but what does that mean? There are two visions of that. There's the be loyal to Bajor by being loyal to the Federation, and there's be loyal to Bajor by not being loyal to the Federation, and now she has to make that choice.
And it's interesting she goes to Odo in this moment, because Odo himself has sort of made this decision in the past. At one point, he was, the head of law enforcement under the Cardassians, enforcing the law. Now he's head of law enforcement under the Federation / Bajoran government, enforcing the law. He's probably done things he's not proud of working under the Cardassians, but he's doing the right thing as best he knows how. And so I think that's why she goes to him to make this moral choice.
The friendship that we see later hasn't developed to this point yet. At best, it's a mutual respect, or at least a one-way respect that she respects him but there's not the friendship that we see develop in later seasons.
It's also interesting that she consults him, and really practically, she'd probably go to a Bajoran Vedic or something to talk this through, but we don't know any Bajoran Vedics on the station at this point. So she goes to Odo, and she's having this crisis of faith about what she's doing with her life. She even says to Odo, I don't know who the enemy is anymore. And he encourages her to confront the situation and not try to hide from it. He invokes the Joranian ostrich, which will hide its head underground even to the point it drowns. And it's like really good that he included the adjective Joranian, because earth ostriches actually do not hide their heads in the ground, despite the legend.
Right.
But then Odo, and this is really amazing when you think about it, she's come to him to sort out what she should do, and he makes the decision for her.
Right.
He forces her hand and calls Cisco and tells him, there's someone down here who wants to talk to you, meaning Kira. So he just shoves her into Cisco's face, although we don't see that scene on screen. We only see the aftermath after she's talked to Cisco about what's really going on.
I think earlier in the conversation, he tells her, like, she says, I have to betray someone, one side or the other. And Odo tells her the only important thing is not to betray yourself or your principles, so to speak. And so I think for Odo, the world is black and white, there's right and wrong. And he says, well, obviously you're going to do the right thing. So I'm going to make that decision now for you, just make you stop dithering over it. It's very interesting. So it turns out the exchange that will take place is going to take place off the station. And the exchange is that Tana is going to take this bomb device from the Duras sisters.
Yeah, he needs a bilitrium cylinder and an antimatter reactor. And those two things together, so he gets the bilitrium cylinder from the Duras sisters, and the antimatter reactor, I guess, is part of the warp-capable shuttle. And with those two things, he then has the parts he needs to create a bomb sufficient to blow up the entrance to the wormhole.
Right.
And thus depriving Bajor of its strategic significance to both the Federation and the Cardassians.
Right. And so the exchange will take place around one of Bajor's moons or another planet in the system. Kira will go with Tana Loss in a runabout. Sisko and O'Brien will follow in another one. And then the Cardassians are supposed to show up at some point and take Tana Loss from there.
Yeah. Things don't go as expected. And there is an interesting moment where, because he's got the bilitrium cylinder and he's traveling at warp, Sisko and O'Brien are afraid of shooting his shuttle because it will scatter radiation all over the system. And Tana Loss is not willing to come out of warp. So it's like, you guys want to shoot me? Go ahead and shoot me. And it's like, wow, this guy is passive aggressive on a Megadeth scale.
Yeah.
He's like, he's fulfilling the letter of his, I don't want to kill anybody, but he's willing to let millions of people die, because if they choose to shoot him, that is what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, like, if he then explodes it in the mouth of the wormhole, doesn't that do the same thing?
I think the sense there is the radiation will all go into the wormhole and just prevent it from opening again.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And they don't really bring up what's going to happen. They don't bring up the prophets at all, which is surprising. Right. I mean, after we've just made contact with our gods, they ought to be talking about that a little bit in this episode. So that's kind of a writing flaw. But I think what the idea is that it'll just reseal the wormhole. So the prophets will still be there, and maybe they'll take the initiative occasionally to send us an orb or something. But we're not just going to be able to go through the wormhole at will like we are now.
Right. So basically, the Cardassians get to say to Sisko, I told you so, which is interesting because the Cardassians turned out to have been right all along.
Yep.
Kira takes Tana Loss through the wormhole instead of, she veers into the wormhole at the last second. And
so by the time he's able to eject the bomb, they're through it and on the other side.
Right, where they can't hurt anybody. And he ends up having to surrender. And then we sort of wrap things up. There's not a whole lot else that happens here. There's Kira says to Tana, when they get back to the station, the old ways don't work anymore. Everything's different now. I had to do this. One day you'll understand. And Tana just throws it back in her face, traitor. And that's where we end, which is an interesting, if this were Voyager, we would have had a scene in Ops where they were standing around a console telling us the lesson of the episode.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that's my notes on this episode. Do you guys have anything that you wanted to bring up?
There's a moment where at a certain point, I guess when they're away from the planets that could be harmed, Sisko is willing to shoot the runabout with Kira on board.
Mm-hmm.
So that was significant. Also, Kira physically fights with Tana Loss for control of the shuttle, and that also makes it more differenter than Voyager and its endings, because in there wouldn't have been a physical fight. They just would have been people talking dramatically, standing over consoles as the climax.
Right.
It's interesting when after the bomb has been jettisoned and the wormhole is safe, and the Cardassians also come through. I think, if I recall correctly, they come through. But there's this a deal that Tana, when he surrenders, he's got to decide, who am I surrendering to? Is it going to be the Federation or the Cardassians? And Sisko gives him that option, and he picks the Federation, which does at least indicate he knows where the lesser of two evils is from his perspective. But he does remain, in the end, unreconstructed.
Right. Father Corey, anything?
Just a couple of interesting actors in this. Gul Dunar, the Cardassian Gull, was played by Vaughn Armstrong. Well, he's best known as Admiral Forrest in Enterprise.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's where that voice sounded familiar under all that makeup.
Yeah, and then the Starfleet Admiral Rollman was played by Susan Bay, also best known as Susan Bay Nimoy, Leonard Nimoy's wife.
Oh. Interesting. I wonder if she did other stuff. Jeffrey Nordling played Tana Loss, and he's a character actor you've seen in a bunch of stuff, including, he's still acting, still working. He hasn't changed much since then. He's one of those ageless sort of actors, but he's been in 24 and a bunch of stuff. Well, before we wrap up, I got a little bit of feedback here. I got a comment on our on YouTube from Studio Lambs. LAMS. So it's on our episode where we talk about Fight or Flight, the Enterprise episode. He said, this episode of Enterprise did a lot to turn me off the show early on, but based on Jimmy's comments, I'll go back and rewatch some of the later episodes to see if the show was as meh as I thought it was when it originally aired. It was never really clear to me in terms of the tone of the series how new exploring the stars really was to humanity at this point. If this is really the first ship being sent out to explore, then everything seems to be working and going way too smoothly. The show was too close to Star Trek Voyager and not enough like Apollo 13.
Yeah.
Although we do know that humans were going out that far based on, like, what's his name?
Is that from Cochrane?
No, the helmsman's family, Merryweather's family.
Yeah.
You know, the freighter families and that sort of stuff were going up pretty far. But it's an interesting perspective that maybe things should not have worked as smoothly as they did.
Yeah, it would be interesting to just, without any setup about, Captain, I'm worried about whether our phaser system is working, just they go to push the button at some point and it just doesn't turn on.
Yeah.
Which is like what tech does in real life.
Right. That is a good point. So thank you, Studio Lambs, for that comment. And hopefully, as you go back and watch some Enterprise, you'll enjoy it. Maybe watch it along with us as we talk about it. That would be a good way to do it. So, but as we wrap up, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including this week, Ernie M., Clinton V., Allison H., Jeff G., and Jeremiah N. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them supporting us financially by visiting sqpn.com/give. So let us know what you thought of Deep Space Nine's episode Past Prologue. You can go to sqpn.com/trek or the SQPN Facebook page and leave us feedback there, or you can send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or like Studio Lambs did, you can leave a comment on YouTube if you listen to us there. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Voyager episode Time and Again. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dom, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, say what you will about Cardassian rule, but at least it was simple.